At 3:15 in the morning on June 22, 1941, history was about to change forever. Imagine the tension in the air as the largest military invasion ever unfolded, stretching nearly 3,000 kilometers across the Eastern Front. Over 3 million German soldiers, backed by a fierce lineup of tanks, artillery, and aircraft, stormed into the Soviet Union. This was Operation Barbarossa, and it was intense. For months, Hitler and Stalin had been playing a dangerous game, pretending to be pals with their non-aggression pact. They even split Poland between them, like kids divvying up candy. But that fateful morning, the thunder of German guns shattered that fragile alliance. Soviet soldiers were caught completely off guard. Some were still snoozing in their beds, while others were enjoying a weekend getaway. Talk about a rude awakening. The chaos didn't stop there. With Stalin in denial and refusing to heed warnings, commanders were left scrambling with confused orders. It was a betrayal of epic proportions, setting the stage for a brutal conflict that would claim more lives and resources than any other part of World War II. This wasn't just another battle. It was a fierce clash of ideologies, a true war of annihilation. Can you even wrap your head around the scale of it all? Hitler's ambition was staggering. To conquer the vast expanse of the Soviet Union in a single lightning-fast campaign, a Blitzkrieg to dwarf all others. He envisioned a swift victory, achieved before the brutal Russian winter could set in. The plan was built on a three-pronged assault. Army Group North, under Field Marshal von Lieb, would drive through the Baltic states towards Leningrad. In the center, Army Group Center, the most powerful of the three and led by Field Marshal von Bock, was tasked with smashing through Belarus to capture the ultimate prize, Moscow. To the south, Army Group South, under Field Marshal von Rundstedt, would seize the resource-rich farmlands and oil fields of Ukraine, aiming for Kiev and the Caucasus. The German High Command was supremely confident. After their swift victories in Poland and France, they believed the Red Army, weakened by Stalin's purges of its officer corps in the late 1930s, would collapse like a house of cards. They predicted the campaign would be over in mere months. In the early weeks, this intense optimism seemed pretty valid. The Luftwaffe wiped out the Soviet Air Force, often taking out planes before they even got off the ground. German panzer divisions cut through unprepared Soviet lines, pulling off massive encirclements. At Minsk and Smolensk, Army Group Center trapped and wiped out entire Soviet armies. Hundreds of thousands of Red Army soldiers ended up captured in these huge pockets. The speed and ferocity of the German advance were downright terrifying. Soviet forces, often poorly led and equipped, fought back with desperate courage but were completely overwhelmed. They fell back, trading space for time, a strategy Russia had used against invaders for ages. But the cost was huge. As the Germans pushed forward, they rolled out the Hunger Plan, a brutal strategy to starve millions of Slavic civilians to feed the German population and army. Special SS units, the Einsatzgruppen, followed the army, systematically killing Jews, communists, and anyone seen as a threat to the Reich. The war in the East was brutal from day one. By late summer, however, the German war machine began to show signs of strain. The vast distances of the Soviet Union were taking a toll. Supply lines stretched to the breaking point, a logistical nightmare of dust in the summer and mud in the autumn. Spare parts, fuel, and ammunition struggled to reach the front. The panzers, the tip of the German spear, were wearing down. Soviet resistance, far from collapsing, was stiffening. Even when encircled, Soviet units often refused to surrender, fighting to the last man and inflicting heavy casualties. The partisan movement began to grow behind German lines, sabotaging railways and ambushing supply columns, turning the rear areas into a second front. Hitler, overconfident and increasingly meddling in military decisions, made a critical error. In August, against the advice of his generals who wanted to push directly for Moscow, he diverted a significant portion of Army Group Center S-tanks south to help encircle a massive Soviet force near Kiev. While the Battle of Kiev resulted in another stunning tactical victory, Capturing over 600,000 Soviet soldiers, it cost the Germans a precious month. The window of opportunity to take Moscow before winter was closing fast. In late September, Hitler finally turned his full attention back to the capital. He launched Operation Typhoon, the final, decisive assault on Moscow. "Today begins the last great, decisive battle of this year," he proclaimed. Initially, the offensive was another spectacular success. German pincers closed around Vyazma and Bryansk, trapping another 600,000 Soviet soldiers. The road to Moscow seemed wide open. Panic gripped the city. The Soviet government evacuated to Kutuzov, though Stalin himself made the crucial decision to remain in the Kremlin, a powerful symbol of defiance. Muscovites dug anti-tank ditches and built barricades, turning their city into a fortress. But then the weather turned. The autumn rains, known as the Rasputitsa, began. The dirt roads dissolved into a sea of impassable mud, bogging down German tanks and supply trucks. The Blitzkrieg literally ground to a halt, the advance slowing to a few kilometers a day. The mud was a greater obstacle than any Soviet army. Then came the cold. In November, the mud froze solid, and the German advance could resume. But it was followed by one of the coldest winters in decades. Temperatures plummeted to -30, even -40 degrees Celsius. The German army was catastrophically unprepared. Their winter clothing was inadequate, their weapons and vehicle lubricants froze solid, and frostbite caused more casualties than combat. Soldiers huddled in the snow, freezing to death in their summer uniforms. Yet, with inhuman effort, some German reconnaissance units pushed to within sight of the Kremlin spires, a tantalizing glimpse of a victory they could not grasp. They were exhausted, frozen, and at the end of their logistical tether. It was at this moment of maximum German weakness on December 5, 1941, that the Soviets struck back. General Georgy Zhukov, a commander of Iron Will, had secretly amassed fresh, well-equipped divisions from Siberia. These troops were experienced in winter warfare. They launched a massive counteroffensive, striking the overstretched and frozen German lines before Moscow. The shock was total. The exhausted Germans, believing the Red Army to be finished, were thrown back in disarray. For the first time in the war, the seemingly invincible Wehrmacht was in full retreat. The failure to take Moscow was a turning point. Operation Barbarossa, the plan for a swift victory, had failed. Hitler's gamble had not paid off. The Blitzkrieg was dead, and Germany was now locked in a protracted war of attrition on two fronts, a war it could not win. The human cost of these first 6 months was astronomical. The Germans had suffered over 1 million casualties, a number they could ill afford. Soviet losses were even more staggering, numbering in the many millions of soldiers and civilians. But unlike Germany, the Soviet Union had a vast pool of manpower and could move its industries east, beyond the reach of German bombers. Operation Barbarossa was not the end of the war on the Eastern Front, but it was the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. The myth of German invincibility was shattered in the snows before Moscow, and the long, brutal road to Berlin had begun. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into history compelling, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more.